Hey YouTube, how you doing? It is Monday afternoon, February 1st, here in the eastern part of the United States. We're getting pummeled by a pretty heavy-duty nor'easter right now. Got about 8 inches of snow out on the ground, so what am I going to do? I'm going to make a video that I've been promising for quite a while. We're going to talk about one of the UK's seminal proto-punk bands, The Killing Joke. I gotta get this down with my lighting here. One of these days I'll go get one of those ring lights or something like that, but it's not gonna happen for a while. When we're let out of our cages, I'll do that. So, Killing Joke. One of my favorite bands, in my top 10 probably. This band formed in late 78, early 79 in the United Kingdom. Initially it was Jazz Coleman and Big Paul Ferguson on drums, Jazz on vocals and keyboards, aligned with Martin Youth Glover on bass, and Kevin Geordie Walker on guitars. I kind of look at Killing Joke in four pretty distinct eras, if you will, as far as their output. They've got, I should have counted these, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, it looks like 14 albums. I hope I didn't screw that up, but unfortunately my Mac took a dump on me on Friday night during the stream. The cord did, and so I don't have the benefit of using my computer here to help me out. I should have remembered all this stuff, but my addled brain doesn't remember details very well. So I'm going to do this pretty much from memory, which may be kind of fucked up. But I got into Killing Joke in probably the mid-90s. I told you guys in my last video about that cool CD store, local mom and pop CD store called XYZ. And again, this was another one of those situations where I walked in looking for whatever. I was taking stuff in to trade in or looking for new material to peruse and listen to. And this particular album was playing on the on his stereo, and this was the 1990 this says 2005, that's definitely not right. I think this was 96. The album Pandemonium. What's kind of cool about this is it's got Jazz's scribble on there from when I saw him back in 2018 down in Baltimore. Jazz came walking up to the just kind of walked out into the crowd and pre-show and started talking with everybody. It was really, really cool. He was a real character, that guy, real cool dude. He asked, I was there with at the time, my son, and he says, do you smoke pot with your boy? That was the first thing he hit me with when I said, oh, this is my son, and this is our third time. I think it was my 6th time seeing them. It was probably my kid's 2nd time seeing them, something like that. That was the first thing he said to me was, does your boy smoke pot with you? I'm like, nah, we haven't tried that yet. So, kind of, Jazz is an interesting cat. But anyway, so the first album came out in 1980. This is the eponymous Killing Joke album. And again, this is very much post-punk, very much the synth 80 kind of amalgam is really what's going on in this. They weren't a super synthy band, but there were a lot of synths in their early works, and throughout. They've been there throughout their entire history, with the exception of a few albums that got more grungy metal, which we'll talk about here shortly. But this is the original album. It did quite well. This has the killer song Requiem, which is a crowd favorite and one that they pretty much play in every set. It also has The Wait, which is another song that they play pretty regularly in all their sets. But there's a lot of War Dance also is another big one on here. So there were 3 pretty big, what I would say, hits that came off this album. So a lot of promise for this band. Some of the other stuff is, it's a really interesting mix of post-punk guitars. So you had that really reverb-drenched, and Jordy plays, I believe he plays a Gibson L5 or an L26, excuse me, an L265, which is a hollow body, semi-hollow body. And it just has a very unique sound. He also runs a dual stereo chorused amp setup, so he's not playing through one amp and a head, he's playing through a stereo setup where there's 2 amps on either side of the stage, and he gets this really slashing, biting, angular, razor sounding guitar tone that is very unique. There's very, very, very few people that I've ever heard sound like this guy, and I would say he was the originator of the sound, and anybody that came afterwards kind of copied it off of him. Guys like Daniel Ash from Bauhaus and stuff like that, although they were pretty similar, coming up at a similar time in the 80s with the genres they were kind of spearheading, because Bauhaus is post-punk. There's some similarities to Killing Joke, not a lot, but some. So the debut album, Killing Joke, 1980, fantastic album. Second album is What's This For? Always have bizarre artwork. Some of it's not the greatest. Some of it's kind of bizarre. This is certainly trippy. But they started adopting this pantomime clown figure around this time. You can see it there on the. Now this is the remaster reissue. I believe these came out in 2007 or 2005, somewhere in that range. And they're good packages because they started to adopt some really interesting, weird visual art with regards to the name, the Killing Joke name. This album, not one of my favorites to be completely honest with you, but it does have The Fall of Because on it. It's got Butcher on it and Madness. And then there's a couple bonus tracks. Probably one of the bottom 2 or 3 most listenable or most listened to Killing Joke CDs for me. And as I said, I kind of look at their material in 4 distinct categories. And the first 4 albums are what I would call the post-punk 80s, very true 80s sounding albums. The production is very 80s, it's very reverb drenched, the drums sound huge, and Big Paul Ferguson is a hell of a fucking drummer. This guy is amazing live. He's like a freight train, he's unreal. But they have this very reverb dry, wet sounding production. The guitars are very angular and all-encompassing. They kind of surround you in a weird way when you're listening to them. They're razor sharp, and they kind of cut through the mix really sharply. The bass is pretty prominent as well from Martin Glover. He did a lot of their, not maybe their early production work, but certainly their later production work, and he became very famous as a producer and engineer post when he left the band in 85, I believe, or 85, I believe it was. No, it wasn't 85. It's probably 83 or 84 when he left the band. Again, without my laptop, I'm going to be a little off on some of these dates, which I apologize for. Probably should have waited, but I may not have that power cord with the way the snow is. I may not have that for a week or so, or 2, the way things are going. This is their third album. This is called Revelations. Again, not my favorite, and other than the very first album of the first 4, I kind of find this is the stuff I least listen to and least like, mainly because I was not a huge punk guy. I appreciate what punk is. I appreciate, a lot of the original punk bands, the Bad Brains, the Minor Threat, the New York Hardcore, Agnostic Front, Cro-Mags, and certainly the California stuff like Dead Kennedys. But it just never, I came up as a prog guy in the 70s, the mid to late 70s. I was a Jethro Tull, Led Zeppelin, Rush, Yes, Genesis guy. And I don't know, I just never really gravitated heavily towards true punk music. It's not that I don't like it, it's just it's probably down the rungs as far as one of my favorite genres. So I at least listened to these albums, the first four. But they're good. Every now and again I throw them on to kind of get a throwback to that early 80s post-punk, you know, the vocals by Jazz, and Jazz is well known for having a very vitriolic, angry style of vocal, and very early on you can hear that in the early post-punk stuff. These first four albums, they're still straddling the line with ska, and there's some, you know, some very bouncy, I would say, synthy bass tracks that are more like the radio staples of this era. Stuff like Chop Suey, the Empire Song, or Chop Chop, I'm sorry, The Land of Milk and Honey, We Have Joy. These are songs that were pretty much staples for them back in the day. But again, this one and the second one are probably my least favorite of that era. Certainly the first album is my favorite. The fourth album brought kind of a big change. Martin Glover left the band, I think, to get into production work where he could make more money. And this is called Fire Dances. Again, these are all reissues for the most part, that I picked up in 2006, 2007, once I learned about the band. This album has The Gathering on it, which The Gathering is what they call their crew of fans. They call them when they have shows and stuff, they call them The Gatherings. It's kind of the gathering of the tribe sort of mentality. This one has Frenzy on it, Harlequin. It has Fire Dances, Dominator, Willful Days, you know, a lot of good stuff. This one has, about 6 bonus tracks, different mixes and whatnot. A good album. It's fun. A lot of upbeat slashing guitar on it, a lot of powerful, energetic drumming. But with this album, as I said, Martin Glover left and Paul Raven came on board as a bassist, and you could kind of feel a more muscular, less groovy ska type vibe to the bass when Paul Raven joined. It was a little bit more muscular, a bit more 80s driven bass, you know, like thumping sort of bass, and you could kind of tell in this album, but much more in the next few albums that are to come. Now here's where they kind of took a turn with 1985's Nighttime and 1986's Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. This album, Nighttime, was kind of their big, I think it was their big breakthrough album. It had the track Nighttime, which was a fairly big hit, Kings and Queens, which was a fairly big hit, but it had the massive big hit Love Like Blood, which is still a staple and just an awesome track to catch live when they do it. It's just such a driving, just a killer track. It's just an awesome, awesome song. And this album, they started to get a lot more keyboard oriented. The guitars took a little bit of more of a toned back seat to synths that were dark and sort of ominous sounding synths. Some of it was a little poppy, but it wasn't like pure pop. This album, once again, another jazz semi whatever scribble on there. I love this album. This is such a good album. It's not my favorite album, but probably in my top 5 for sure, maybe 4 or 5. But the song Love Like Blood was the big hit and really rocketed them into what I would call the big leagues as far as UK acts at that point in time. It just made them that much more soluble on the other side of the ocean too. That's where they got more recognition in the States, because prior to that they weren't very big in the States at all. They were pretty much predominantly a UK European band. 1986 saw the release of what I would honestly say is probably my favorite Killing Joke album. It's a really dark synth pop masterpiece to me. I think this album is just brilliant. That's Jazz on the front there, Geordie there. This album is just dark, foreboding, but still it has such a beautiful, there's Big Paul on my right here and Paul Raven there. It just has such a dark beauty to it. I can't explain it. You know, when I first heard this album, I was like, man, this just... There's no question that their label, who was EG, I think at the time, probably pushed them to be more radio friendly, particularly after the success of Nighttime. But how they did it was not a typical, let's go write a bunch of pop songs. They definitely added a lot more orchestral dynamics and a lot more dark ambient keyboards to it. There's definitely some bounciness to some of these tracks. Definitely a lot of vocal hooks, and you will never hear Jazz sing like he did on this album and a little bit on Nighttime. Even on Nighttime, he still has an edge, a grit to his voice. He very much sounds what probably a lot of old Killing Joke fans would say is saccharine, sweet. But he has such a great voice, and it's just the way he sings on this album is beautiful. Songs like Adoration, Sanity is so good. Sanity is just, oh my God, it's such a beautiful song. Chessboards has got this really neat little groovy, chimey sort of guitar lick to it, and that's one of the words I would use to describe Geordie's guitar tone on these last two albums is chimey. There's a richness to it and a very much an 80s sound, no question, very much an 80s sound, but it doesn't sound dated when you listen to it, at least it doesn't to me. A Southern Sky is gorgeous. Winter Gardens, Rubicon, just such an incredible album. This album, Brighter Than a Thousand Suns, my top one, without question. Which is weird, because when you talk to other Killing Joke fans, it's either way up at the top or it's way down at the bottom. And I would say for the punk era, proto-punk fans, that album is way down at the bottom. Next up, 87 or 88. Unfortunately, these reissues all say 2007, so I can't be 100% sure because I don't have my cheat sheet here in front of me with regards to this is 88. And Outside the Gate was actually supposed to be a Jazz Coleman solo album. Oops. I tend to be dropping CDs a lot lately. Oh, it's broken. The little tongues are broken in the inside. This was supposed to be a Jazz solo album, and it definitely sounds like it. It's very keyboard oriented. It's very, very pop oriented, and not in a good way like this album was pop oriented. This one sounds like Jazz was trying to write some radio friendly hits, and they don't really come across very well. In fact, the only really good song that I like on this is America, The Calling, and Outside the Gate. This is probably my least favorite album of theirs. Rarely ever put it on. It's just not a very good album, but it comes with 2, 4, 6, 7 bonus tracks. One called Jihad that's actually not that bad, which was a B-side. But that album, if you're a completist like me, you want it. For me, it just really wasn't that good of an album, and it got panned pretty bad, and actually it kind of almost led to the band breaking up in a lot of ways. They took quite a bit of time off before they put out the next album here, which is called Extremities, Dirt, and Various Repressed Emotions, which came out in 1990? I believe this came out in 1990. This is the big bonus, I don't know, super fragilalistic, however you say that, super califragilisticexpialidocious version here. And they actually, for the longest time, they were on Virgin, EG Records, which is an imprint of Virgin, and I believe after that album they either got dropped or they didn't get picked up, and they ended up signing. This came out on Candlelight, of all strange oddities. This is where the third incarnation of Killing Joke starts to take place, and they become a just crushingly heavy, super distorted, angry, vitriolic, pissed off band. I mean, I think that, you know, to be blunt, that Jazz has always been a pissed off, angry guy. And this is kind of cool. Comes on an all black CD. It comes with one of those terrible fucking dual disc things where one side's video and one side's audio. Hate these things. They suck. But there is a bunch of video material on this, and again, this is the reissue, repress. This album is fierce, angry, pissed off. The guitars start to add a lot more distortion, a ton more distortion than they used to, although they still very much sound like Geordie on guitar. The bass becomes a much more prominent driving feature in the band, and with this album, Big Paul's drumming is just... Actually, this might be the one... I'm wrong. Big Paul left. Big Paul left after the Twilight. Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. And actually stepped in Martin Atkins. If you know punk and industrial, Martin Atkins was in, I believe he was in KMFDM, or was it Ministry? Probably one or the other. I believe maybe he was in both of those. Kind of a renowned industrial drummer. And that is where, with this album, you start to hear the industrial vibe start to come into their music. And industrial really kind of started in the, in the early 90s, late 80s, very late 80s, early 90s with Skinny Puppy, Frontline, stuff like that, Ministry. But this definitely has a Ministry vibe. Which came first, I would have to look it up, and I don't really remember or know. I believe Ministry was around a little bit before, but a lot of people talk about how early Killing Joke had a direct effect on creating the vibe for and setting the groundwork for what became industrial music. And you can hear that going back through their music, but this album has a real industrial driving intensity to it. Tracks like Money Is Not Our God is just a screamer. Age of Greed and Extremities are fucking nasty. Slipstream, Struggle, Inside the Termite Mound. This album is a ripper. It's in my top 5. It's heavy as fuck. It'll bash your face in from about 100 feet away. Jazz really starts to take on that maniacal, crazed frontman sort of vibe, and if you've seen them, you know what I mean. He's incomparable. He's unreal live. He's just so into it, and he's fierce. And the dude's, I don't know, I think he's 63 or 4 now. Last time I saw him, he wasn't letting up much. He's just got such a distinct timbre to his voice. He's not singing clean and nice and pretty anymore like he did in the prior era, the 3 albums prior before. He's pissed, he's angry, and he wants you to know it, and he wants you to feel it, and you definitely feel it on this album. And that kind of begins their projection forward from that point forward till they get to the 4th incarnation for the last 3 or 4 albums, where I would say they kind of became more of a kind of a metal band in a lot of ways. Not really much industrial left, but we'll get there soon. I gotta be honest with you, I haven't listened to this in forever, but this is another, it's a dual disc. One's a live set from France from '91, and there's a ton of mixes and rehearsal tracks on here. Probably has only gotten 1 or 2 listens from me, but because I'm not a huge live guy, but in order to complete the catalog, I had to go there. So we get back to the first album that I ever heard in, like I said, 94, 95, whenever this came out, 96, Pandemonium. I would hesitate to say this is completely like Extremities, but there's a lot of... This album and the next one I would almost call a 5th, or I'd call it the 4th, as opposed to the 5th as being the metal. So maybe 5 sort of genre-specific kind of... There's still a lot of elements of industrial in here, still a lot of elements of 80s, but what they really added here was a lot of Middle Eastern stuff, Martin Glover came back on the scene for a while. He was back in. I think Paul Raven left for a little while. There was kind of a musical chairs thing going on with Raven and Glover for a while. Glover's been back for a long time because unfortunately Paul Raven died in 2007 of a heart attack. But this album is right up there, number 1 or number 2 for me. Well, it's number 2 because number 1 is Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. This would probably be my number 2 favorite. Long tracks, fierce guitar, a lot of Middle Eastern vibes to it, a lot of Middle Eastern horns and psychedelic shit going on. This album has a lot of psychedelia in it. It's trippy, it's lush, it's gorgeous sounding, the mixes on it are great. This one has like a 12-minute bonus track that is like a dub step sort of thing that Martin Glover put together. Highly recommend this one. And actually, in starting people out, I probably wouldn't start them out on Brighter Than a Thousand Suns. I would probably say start in the middle here. Either start with the very first one or start with Nighttime or this one. Those would be the 3 that I would always kind of say are places, good entry points for this band. Pandemonium, fucking awesome. The song Millennium is just so good. Sorry, I can't read the titles that way. Black Moon is awesome. Labyrinth, Communion, Pandemonium, just top fucking shelf album. Fantastic, and my first entry point to them. Probably my second album by them was the one that followed, and this is actually an original Zoo 96. So that was 94, was Pandemonium. This is 96, Democracy. Very similar to Pandemonium, except a little bit more streamlined, maybe ever so slightly more radio friendly. Dare I say that they're not? It's not really radio friendly, but it kind of is. There's a little bit more elements of the lighter moments of Ministry on here. Songs like Savage Freedom, Democracy, Prozac People, about people drugging down and drugging out. Lanterns is a beautiful sort of ballad. Pilgrimage is fantastic. Another Bloody Election is super fucking fiery punk. That's the most punk song on here. Aeon, another fantastic track. Just a killer album. I love this album. Probably number 3 on my list. And it was just one of those ones that really got me. Again, the weird pantomime creature that they put in their stuff. So Democracy, absolutely would suggest that as also an entry point if you're looking to get into this band, because there's a lot of great songs on there. Next up, that was 96. I think there was a fairly lengthy break. I'm missing one album of theirs. The second self-titled Killing Joke album that has the clown on the front, and because I'm still working with my phone and don't have my laptop, I'm not going to superimpose it. You can look it up. It's just Killing Joke. Came out in 2002 or 2003, and it's unique because still Paul Ferguson was still kind of out of the picture at that point. I don't remember. Let me look and see if he came back for Pandemonium and Democracy. He may have. He was, like I said, there was a kind of a revolving door. It was always Kevin Walker, Geordie, and Jazz, but the bass seat and the drummer's seat, Paul Ferguson left to play in Warrior Soul. He played in a couple of other bands, Warrior Soul being one of the biggest ones that I know and remember. Trying to see if he played on this or not. Actually, it doesn't even have who the drummer is on this. Weird. But he had left, and they did this 2003 album after being kind of quiet for probably about 7 or 8 years. They hadn't put an album out, and they reformed, and I think Paul Ferguson didn't want to be part of it at that point in time, and they got Dave Grohl. Dave Grohl petitioned them to play drums on their album because he was such a huge fan. That album kicks ass. That is where they kind of transitioned into their metal phase. And all these albums now going forward are quasi-metal, quasi-industrial, but they're more metal than industrial in my opinion. 2006, they Paul Ferguson, I believe, rejoined the band at this point. I believe, pretty sure he did, and they put together this monster, pummeling, brutal album. Let's see here. I just want to make sure I'm not completely hosing you guys. No, this has a guy named Benny Calvert. Okay, so Paul Ferguson didn't come back until the most recent 3 albums, starting with Absolute Descent in 2010, I believe it was. 2006, they drop, and I don't know who Benny Calvert is. I have no idea who he is. Hosannas from the Basements of Hell. This album is dense, thick, skull-crushing, heavy as fuck. It's just a brutal album. It's unrelenting, and it is not where I would start with Killing Joke, because it is just a battering ram of an album. I love it. A lot of people don't like it because of the production. The production's a bit muddy. It's not awesome, and there's a lot of really long songs on here, like The Lightbringer and Judas Goat, Invocation, Hosannas from the Basement of Hell. This one does have the This Tribal Antidote, which is a song they fairly play regularly. That kicks ass. This album is brutally heavy. Probably my number 5 album in their catalog. But it's dense. It is thick. It is pummeling. It's disturbing. Jazz's vocals on this album may be the most intensely frightening that he's ever sounded. He just sounds, honestly, he sounds unhinged. If you don't know anything about Jazz, Jazz disappears from time to time. He has, from what I understand, he has no actual real home. He doesn't own a house or anything. He's a migrant. He kind of moves around and couch surfs and stays with friends and acquaintances and girlfriends and all that kind of stuff. But he's a brilliant fucking guy. He's a conspiracy guy, but he's fucking brilliant. He's up there. I mean, he's kind of out there, but he's up there with regards to his intellect. So, and then the final 3 albums here are also big time favorites. And when I bought those early albums, Pandemonium, Democracy, I think that was all I really bought, maybe the first one. And I didn't really stay with them. I just listened to those 2, and then I think I heard they broke up after Democracy, and I was like, they're done, they're over with. And of course, this is pre-internet, so you couldn't really follow what was going on with a band like that. And then somewhere along the lines, I don't really recall where or how, I was clued in that they were back together. And this time, Paul Ferguson's back on board, and also so is Youth's back on board. I think he was on the Hosannas album though. This is Absolute Descent from Spine Farm from 2010. Fucking awesome album, absolutely killer. It's in that top echelon of albums. All these latest 3 that they put out in the last 10 years are really fucking awesome. Much more metal tinged. There's a lot more metal vibe to a lot of these songs. Songs like Absolute Descent, fantastic, but they're still very hummable, very melodic, and they're metallic and heavy, but they have their own sound. That's the thing about Killing Joke. They have their own sound. They sound like nobody else. A lot of people have imitated and copied them, but when they got into the metal thing here, it's not like they suddenly, it's like, oh, okay, that's Ministry 2, or Ministry Light or something. It's not like that at all. These guys had their own vibe with it, and a lot of it centers around Big Paul's percussive freight train type drums, Martin Glover's solid in the pocket bass playing, and Jordy's really unique guitar tone is still there. It's a little more metallic and a little heavier now, but it's ever present. It's driving. It just propels the stuff along. He rarely ever does a lead. There's no shredding leads on any of their songs, which is cool. But every song is catchy. Every song, for the most part, is melodic. But still, it crushes your fucking head in with a sledgehammer. Just awesome. Not every song's like that on here. There's the awesome European Superstate, which is all synth that I believe Jazz did. Super fucking cool song. They play it almost every show that I've seen them. The Great Call. In Excelsis is a great tune. The Raven King is dedicated to Paul Raven. It's a beautiful, beautiful song. That's not a heavy song. Depth Charge is kind of a punky, punch to the face song. Here Comes the Singularity is kind of almost a poppy metal tune. And then the last song, Ghosts of Ladbroke Grove, is it's definitely a ska tune. It's reggae. It's not heavy at all. Great tunes to it. Or great tunes. Great melodies to it. Super, super cool album. Absolute Descent. That would also be a very big entry point for me. In fact, that might be the one I would suggest to everyone, that if you're going to get into modern day, and that's what led me to start digging all through their back catalog, was this album. Absolute Descent, absolutely necessary if you're going to get into Killing Joke. This is, I hate to say this, I don't know what MM means. I know XI is 12, so I'm assuming this is 2012. Yeah, XX 2012. This is the album that they put out 2012. The art's kind of cheesy. It's very, I don't know, very Photoshoppy looking, but another ripper of an album. Of course, like all my cases, busted up. This is a ripper of a metal album. Lots of great fucking tunes like FEMA Camp, Pole Shift, Colony Collapse, Corporate Elect is fucking cool. In Cythera is probably the one European superstate keyboard dominated track. On All Hallows Eve is kind of a mellower ending to the album, but Primobile, Glitch, Trance, every one of these songs, very political. Jazz is extremely political. He's very socially conscious and socially politically aware, and he's very much aware of the global elect and the global state that a lot of conspiracy people think the world is shifting towards. You know, of course, if you're, you know, a Trump person and watching this, which you're probably not, you know, you probably totally believe in the fact that we're all trying to be one global unified governing body, and that's what the pandemic was. But whatever, we're not getting into politics here. But Jazz is very political, and all of his lyrics, particularly the last 5 or 6 albums, are highly politically charged, highly accusatory towards most governments, particularly the U.S. government, all of, you know, Bush, Reagan, Clinton, Obama, and Trump. Well, they didn't put anything out during well, I guess they did. This came out in 2015, so it didn't come out. They haven't put anything out in the Trump era yet, but I'm sure they will soon. But kick-ass album, very metallic, very heavy, very driving, very guitar-driven, drum-driven, and Jazz is howling like a fucking maniac over top of it. Just awesome. And then their most recent album is called Pylon. That came out in 2015. Has the song I'm the Virus, Autonomous Zone, Dawn of the Hive, War on Freedom. This one also has 5 additional songs on it here that were on a 2 CD version. And this is, again, it's more of, I don't want to say it's more of the same, because every one of their albums sounds very different, but in terms of, they sound different, but they always sound like Killing Joke. They always sound crushing. It's very fucking heavy. There's Jazz when he dresses up like the crazed nutter when he gets on stage, and they're still holding fairly true to the pantomime. There's Geordie Walker, Paul Ferguson, Martin Glover, who's been back with them, I guess, since, as I said, Hosannas from the Basements. Killing Joke has a ton of live material, and because I thought I was going to be a completist, I grabbed some of those. This is called 25 The Gathering. I don't know if that was for their 25th anniversary. I think it was. It's got a lot of their big stuff like Communion, War Dance, Bloodsport, Requiem, Asteroid. Asteroid's off of the one album I don't have, because it went out of print, and that's why I didn't get it. And it was stupid expensive, and still CD copies are 30 or so bucks. I heard it was being repressed. I don't think it's happened yet because of the pandemic. I'll grab it when it comes out. But the one with Dave Grohl from 2003, the Killing Joke album, that's also another starting point. So there's about 5 albums I'd recommend if you watch through this the whole way, you'll get them all. I know I'm kind of all over the map here. This is called the Duende Sessions. These are kind of like rehearsals, or not rehearsals, live tracks in like studio. That was a Candlelight thing. Barely ever listened to it. And then there was a 4-disc or a 2-disc version of this thing called The Gathering 2008. I grabbed parts 1 and 2 because they were cheap. I think I got them their dual disc, 2-disc live versions from, this is a Candlelight 2. This came out in 2009. There is a book edition with all 4 CDs, but they literally play, this has 9, 10, 19 tracks on it. This one has 21 tracks on it. I think they play somewhere upwards of 40 tracks on this live set that are all different. And it's a decent live recording. It doesn't sound like a soundboard though. But again, I'm not a big live guy, so I don't really listen to it much. And then the last thing to add is I have this Killing Joke singles collection. This is all the singles that were released from 79 through 2012. And also a bunch of material that, it's a 3 CD package. Bunch of unreleased stuff that never made it out, like, this has their very first single, Nervous System, War Dance, Requiem, Follow the Leader, all the way down through. This one goes through the solo album that was supposed to be the solo album. CD2 has The Beautiful Dead, a flexi disc version that isn't on anything, a live version of Exorcism that was never out before, several different edits of songs off Millennium and Pandemonium because they're so long. Has Fresh Fever from the Skies, which was a Record Store Day exclusive, a dub edit for Ghosts of Ladbroke Grove, an edit of In Cythera, and then the rarities on CD3, which is why I got it was for, there's a Mortal Kombat soundtrack song on here called Drug. There's a song from the Showgirls movie called Hollywood Babylon. They have a song from Free the West Memphis 3, if you know what that is, you know what that is, called Our Last Goodbye. There's a song, an unreleased track from Absolute Descent called Sixth Sun. A demo from Absolute Descent called Time Wave. Another demo, rough mix of a song called Feast of Fools from Absolute Descent. And then there's a DVD track here called Xenon. And Four Stations of the Sun was an unreleased track from Democracy. And the full-length Anterion mix of Pandemonium. Lots of killer stuff on there. Well worth having. Just as a quick aside, and I mentioned this a long time ago in an earlier video, there is a box set of this called the Singles Collection where they have 33 individual, I don't know if they're 12 or 7-inch discs. Each one has 2 tracks on it, like a single, like a 45 would be. It's got a book, it's got cigar papers from Paul Raven and jazz from the Hosannas from the Basement of Hell sessions. Paul Raven was on that album, by the way. I just remember that because that's in that set. That thing goes for $600 or $700. When it came out, I almost bought it back in 2013, but I was in between jobs and decided that wouldn't be a good idea. So, there you have it. That's the Killing Joke discography, with the exception of the self-titled 2003 album, which I definitely got to get on and get. Absolutely worth investing your time into this band. They are fucking amazing. They are an incredible band. They straddle a bunch of different genres, from proto-punk, post-punk, post-punk, to proto-synth, proto-80s, to some really weird proggy Middle Eastern sounding industrial, to all out, brain bashing industrial metal, and finally a good mix of metal with some pop sensibilities, and by pop I just mean melodic sensibilities. Killing Joke, fucking kick-ass band. I hope you made it to the end of this video. I got one more I think I'm going to drop about this band. I got to cut it yet. We're going to talk about this album, the 50th anniversary of Love Forever Changes, one of the greatest albums ever made in the history of music. We'll get onto that shortly. But hope you dug this and found some interesting stuff about Killing Joke. I apologize about the dates and some of my tangential discussions of some of this stuff without my laptop and losing it and not knowing when I'm going to get it back, probably 2 weeks. I wanted to get a video out, and I hope this was substantial Hope you guys enjoyed it. Stop back and see me again when I drop that love video, and I appreciate you